Brain direction is the first lesson in filmmaking for a storyboard artist. I'm Doug Lefler, and welcome to Storyboard Art. Live-action films are shot in three-dimensional space, where the characters can move about in any direction, limited only by environment and gravity. When we film a scene in three-dimensional space, the camera compresses the image onto a two-dimensional picture plane, which we will eventually view on a flat surface. This means that the action must now obey rules for graphic clarity. No matter how dynamic the action is towards camera or away from it, we are dealing here with two directions, which are left and right, and occasionally up and down or some form of diagonal. If we shot movies like they were a stage play, it would be simple to maintain a sense of geography for the audience. Everything would occur in a wide shot, but that wouldn't take advantage of the camera's ability to get you close to the actors, to put you in the middle of the drama or the middle of a battle scene. For clarity in filmmaking, if we begin an action moving left to right, we continue that action in the same direction, from shot to shot if the action is continuous. If we stage a dialogue scene, as I have here, with John Hannah on the left and Colin Firth on the right, then John in his single will still be looking right to Colin, Colin will still be looking left to John. For most artists, this concept of maintaining left and right direction is pretty simple to understand since we draw on flat surfaces, we work in a two-dimensional world. But when you're standing on a film set and you have all of this space around you, maintaining the correct left and right direction can be surprisingly difficult. And for this reason, the 180-degree rule was created. Draw an imaginary line through the action. You have 180 degrees on either side of that line where it's safe to put the camera. So in this case, the white area is good and the gray area is bad. And anywhere we put the camera in the white area will give us wide shots, over the shoulders, and singles that all agree with one another. So in this case, our mustache swordsman is always on the left, our bearded swordsman is always on the right. When you need to change direction, show it on camera. So if your combatants need to swap positions, or if they're moving left to right and you need them to go right to left, you just need to show it in a shot wide enough to reestablish the geography. What happens when we add additional characters? That'll add complexity to the scene, which may be minor or severe depending on the degree to which the new characters engage in the action. For example, in the scene we have here, let's say we introduce a man wearing a hat and carrying a walking stick. If this newcomer is a mere observer, we might place him between the two combatants, so we know that if he looks camera left, he's looking at the mustache swordsman. If he looks camera right, he's looking at the bearded swordsman. And we've just given the editor a shot that he can cut to build interest and bridge action. But let's say our man with the hat draws a sword from his cane and attacks the mustache swordsman. He's now become part of the scene in a way that's going to necessitate a new line of action and a new 180 degrees of safe area. Now here's where we're going to have to make some decisions. Let's say we place the camera here to get a nice over-the-shoulder shot of our man with the hat fighting our man with the mustache. But now, if the hat man were to turn and look at the beard man, we see where we have a problem because the beard man's now on the wrong side of the camera lens. Seen from above, the reason for this is because our new camera position is inside of the gray area, the negative zone for the first line of action. At this point, there's still a simple solution. If the man in the hat, instead of looking at where the bearded man is actually standing on set, cheats his eye line to the other side of the camera lens, then instead of looking this way, camera left, he would be looking camera right, and his eye line would agree with the single we've already shot on the bearded man, and both shots would agree with the wide angle. Film grammar, like any grammar, exists to promote clarity by limiting ambiguity. Now, we learn the language of cinema the same way we learn our mother tongue. We grow up with it. And when movies violate film grammar, we sense it. It causes a disruption in the force. However, as filmmakers, it's important that we understand the reasons for the rules rather than just following them as dogma. There are two occasions to cross the line. One is to create confusion, although I would advise you to think very carefully before you intentionally confuse your audience. And two is when there are other factors to clarify geography. If there are enough visual landmarks in the scene that the relative geography of the characters is unquestionable, we can often get away with cutting across the line. A good example of this is when we film Cars. It's very clear where the driver's seat is, where the passenger seat is, where the front and back seats are. So we can often cut across the line without confusing the audience. Another way to cross the line is to do it on a distinct action. For example, If our swordsman with the hat were to disarm the mustache swordsman using an elegant pivot movement, then we could cut to the other side of the line as he comes out of his turn, and we, the audience, would assume it's the same actor finishing the motion as began the motion. Another way to get to the other side of the line is to cut to a neutral shot first. In this example, we're cutting to the mustache man's rapier landing in the foreground of the shot with the bearded man in the background, but the sword is dead center in the frame. Now we're safely on the other side of the line, and everyone has a new relative position. An elegant way to cross the line is to move the camera within the shot. So in this case, we simply track from one side of the swordsman to the other, and the audience has made the journey there with us. Another convention of screen direction is that if you film a car or a plane or a spaceship moving in one direction, then when you cut inside, the characters are facing that same direction. There used to be a convention that when characters went through doorways that they should maintain the same relative direction. So if they're approaching a house moving left to right, they should enter the house moving left to right. And you'll still find this in a lot of older books on filmmaking. Personally, I think that all bets are off when you go through a doorway. Unless you're filming a conversation through a doorway, whether that doorway is open or closed, then you should maintain the relative left-right positions. Some people think there's a psychological difference between moving left to right or right to left. I think it's much more important what the location has to offer you, where the sun is on that day, and which direction is going to give you a nicer shot. Shooting scenes around a table are notoriously difficult, but they're more difficult in theory than they are in practice. They would be difficult if every character was of equal importance, but most scenes aren't written that way. Most scenes have one or two characters that are the focal point of the action. If you do find yourself in a situation with multiple characters seated at a table and they're all engaged in the action, then you want to use all of the tools that I've already mentioned. You want to cut on distinctive actions, you want to cut to neutral shots, you want to track from one side of the line to the other. But probably most important, you want to make sure that you have good visual landmarks behind the characters in each direction. So, maybe a doorway one way, window another way, fireplace another way. Those things will all help keep the geography clear in the audience's head, and you probably also need to use a lot of over-the-shoulder shots between the characters that are currently conversing or engaging in action. Screen direction is one of those things that's so integral to storyboarding that I don't think about it much anymore when I'm doing my job. So if I've forgotten anything, or if you have any specific questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And you can do that at the same time you're liking and subscribing. Audiences have a very poor sense of geography when they're inside the cutting of a film, and as storytellers, we're always fighting this. But as filmmakers, we can take advantage of it, and I'm going to show you an example of how to do that. Let's return to our fencing match. A woman holding a parasol has entered the foreground of the shot and is watching the action. She needs a close-up. But here's the problem. Where she's standing on the location, right behind her is an entire film crew. To move all of that, including production vehicles and craft service tables, would take a long time. Or we could simply ask the other actors to move out of the shot, turn the actress with the parasol around, and point the camera at a nondescript part of the background. And voila, we have her single. Filmmakers use cheats like this all the time, and we as audience members just accept it. We don't even question how the same sun can be backlighting all the actors throughout all the scene, no matter which direction the camera is pointing. It's a miracle.